So for the main topic of this episode, we're going to have a little bit of a lineup discussion in this episode. So I'm going to first begin with the starters. So before actually like previewing who I think the starting five might be for the San Antonio Spurs by the time the season starts, I want to first look at who are the players that I think are locked into the starting lineup that for sure are going. Those players are going to start. So the first player is the easiest answer to this question. It's Victor Wembanyama. We know Wemby's going to start. You know that's just there's there's no discussion about that, no debate about that. I think another player who's a locked in starter for sure is Devin Vassell. So Vassell and Wemby are locks, and then the third player as I look at who's a lock to be in the starting lineup, I think it's Chris Paul, just based on what we saw when he agreed to sign with the Spurs. He basically there was that reporting that he had that conversation with Coach Pop, and he wants to prove that he can still be a really good a really good point guard in this league. So I think just based off the conversations the Spurs had with Paul, he kind of understands that he's not coming in to be a backup, at least out the gate. He's at least coming in to probably be a starter for this young team. So again, I think those three players are locked in for starting spots. Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, and Victor Wembanyama. Before I go into some iterations of what I'm kind of looking at in different kind of starting lineups, I want to talk about just the rotation players. Who do I think are locked in players to for sure get rotation minutes, whether that's in the starting group or off the second unit. And here I've identified 9 players to be in the Spurs' at least rotation. Whether Pop wants to go with 10 players, 11 players, as his normal rotation during the regular season. That'll be a question up for that time later on in the season. But at least initially, like on paper, I think we can identify 9 players that are probably going to be in the Spurs' rotation. So regardless of lineup starting or not starting, here are those 9 players. So the 3 players I just mentioned: Wemby, Devin Vassell, Chris Paul are the first 3. Then Keldon Johnson, whether he's starting or he's coming off the bench, he's going to be in one of the rotations for the Spurs. Harrison Barnes, who the Spurs acquired via trade, whether he's starting or he's coming off the bench, he's going to be most likely in the 9-man rotation. Trey Jones, also, what he's probably going to end up coming off the bench now that Chris Paul's on this team, but still, Trey Jones will get minutes. He's been a foundational part of the Spurs team for the last few years. Jeremy Sohan will also get minutes, whether he's starting or coming off the bench. And then Zach Collins, I think he's still got that job right now as the backup to Wemby, as that backup 5. If the Spurs continue to go with Wemby at the 5 kind of lineup to start games, so I think Zach Collins still has a locked in position. And then lastly, Stephon Castle, the rookie. Pop basically said on a broadcast during one of the summer league games that Castle's going to get early minutes in his rookie season, and you expect that from Castle, a player who was drafted with the 4th pick. So with Castle, as I'm going to get into in a little bit, we don't know if he's going to start early on in his career, or maybe he might come off the bench. But I think for sure he's going to be in the lineup. Like, he's going to be one of those 9 players getting minutes for the San Antonio Spurs. So again, just out of the gates, before we dive into these actual lineups, I think the 3 locked in starters for sure are Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, and Victor Wembanyama. And then the 9 players who I think are gonna definitely get minutes are Paul, Vassell, Wemby, Keldon, Harrison Barnes, Trey Jones, Jeremy Sohan, Zach Collins, and Stephon Castle. So those 9 players.